Morning again. Sir, last class we were writing about Levi-Strauss. What I thought was I'll bring a brief discussion which is comparative about Malinowski, Brown and Levi-Strauss. So we'll speak a few things about them. In the process, I will be explaining certain things that were not clear to the students and certain additional things as well. See, all the three are having one particular way of changing in their approach. So in that process, I am trying to point out, to begin with, their basic ways of looking at things. Keep looking at the second one there. So throughout the next 15 to 20 minutes of time, we will be talking about Malinowski versus Brown and Levi-Strauss, meaning that we are looking at people who move from functionalism to structural functionalism, and the last one is called a structuralist. For all practical purposes, he is called a structuralist. A bonus title was given to him that he is a symbolic anthropologist as well. So I am broadly trying to look at a few methodologies of fieldwork and the concepts, the way they have tried to explain. As I am mentioning here, see, everything with regard to Malinowski revolves around the individual and his basic needs, and from those needs emerges a culture group's response in the form of establishing certain institutions. So institutions are functionalistic orientation of the institutions is his area of interest. When it comes to the second person, that is Brown, it is the social structures and social system that is of importance, whereas the other person is talking about mental structures, which seems to be a slightly an odd thing out. See, such a question is a rarity. Such a question is a rarity, sir. A couple of scripts are pending with me. Give me some time. I'll get back on that. And keep sending your answers to my mail ID so that things won't get delayed and kind of. और ये भी था कि I don't know whether books are issued to you. Because I'll find out with them, because we have handed over to them long time back, I think 4 or 5 days ago. They should have come to you by now. I'll just cross check with them and see to it that tomorrow or day after tomorrow before the class it is done. Of course, with regard to anthro thought, there is nothing much in that book, but there will be a psychological satisfaction and urge कि कुछ तो मिल जाए हाथ में पकड़ने के लिए, kind of a thing. So material is many times important. Material in the sense the physical thing is much more important many times than the non-material, unseeable, untouchable thing. So those are the couple of things. We will keep looking at these persons. So those are the fieldwork related things. Malinowski was talking about realistic ethnographs, very detailed ones, realistic. As I was making a comment some time back, Malinowski is a person close to the field and less close to the laboratory or library. We also know by now that his theories have no grand utility compared to the way he had dealt with the fieldwork. As far as the second person, Brown, is concerned, he is known for giving importance to theory building rather than field work, though he was also a person who went to the field work, with those two being the very significant field studies of him, Andaman Islanders and Australian Aborigines. He was mostly oriented towards theory building. It is here that I would want to say a few things about him. Then we'll take you to the concept of mental structures again. And I know by now you already know this name of Nambikwara Indians that was studied by Levi Strauss. There are certain things I want to talk about Brown as a continuation from the last class. In the last class, I had stopped at a topic called general and particular social structures. He was trying to study the arrangement of people in a specific way, based on the social requirement to be fulfilled. Yeah. Always bear in mind that for Brown, society and society's survival is important. Everything an individual has to do, that will be for the survival, for the continuation of the society. Keeping that in view, social structure is the arrangement that he speaks of, arrangement of individuals in a particular manner so that an organizational requirement or a societal requirement is fulfilled. If I am explaining that, for instance, if we are talking about nuclear family, having so and so members arranged in a particular manner, that arrangement is primarily to fulfill certain societal requirements. The societal requirement a nuclear family might be fulfilling is like maybe generation of the progeny, or division of labor, or upbringing of children, or several other types of cooperations. All these are basically to see to it that the very foundational requirements of a society are fulfilled by this institution of family. You should understand the two different ways in which the same institution is understood and analyzed by Malinowski and Brown. Malinowski, if at all he has to explain family, he will look at all those individual requirements. Whereas for Brown, it is society's survival that is important. For the survival of society, family has to come up with certain duties. Are you following, sir? Are you following? Please be with me. Please be with me. I thought we are already late. So don't take time to come into the class psychologically. Bearing this in mind, when he is analyzing social structures, he is using this word general social structure to indicate that every culture group comes up with a particular arrangement which is more or less permanent. But of course he understands that no social structure is totally permanent. That's the secondary thing. But with regard to general social structure, initially what he meant was, this is a more or less permanent arrangement in order to fulfill a set of requirements for the society. That is where I was mentioning that you are not pinpointedly naming the individuals who are there in a particular social structure at that point of time. You can perhaps link it with something like diachronic and synchronic. In one of them we see the continuous process, in the other one we are pinpointedly mentioning at that point of time what is happening or who is there. So he is pointing at both the things. One is more or less a permanent social structure, which is devised by that culture group so that the cultural requirements are fulfilled. And at different points of time, individuals might be changing in that social structure, filling in, coming into the shoes of the predecessors. But in the process, sometimes what might happen is, see, it is very obvious that particular social structure is a continuously changing one, but occasionally general social structure might also change. See, to look at in a very basic academic way, this looks to be not a grand concept to talk about. But then when he tried to apply it to certain institutions such as clans or band level organizations in Andaman and Australian Aborigines, this went on to help him study change the culture group is undergoing over a period of time. I repeat what I said. General and particular social structures, they seem to be smaller concepts, but their utility is seen much more in the field. When he was reporting on Andaman Islanders and Australian Aborigines, the institutions he is studying there, or if at all I have to use his own terminology, the social structures he is trying to study there are the band, which is lowest level of, or the primary level of political organizations, and there is something like a clan. When such institutions or social structures are being studied over a period of time, taking into account the general and particular social structures, he could write the entire ethnograph from the cultural change perspective. Am I? There is something else about Brown. Of course, at a very personal level, you remember we have shown you a picture of Torres Strait expedition. Torres Strait expedition, some people there like Seligman, Haddon, and Rivers was there. Brown was in a way attracted towards the authors or the people who participated in Torres Strait expedition. Among several of them, two people had a very strong impact on him. One was Rivers, the other one was Haddon. Haddon, Haddon. Maybe it is an accident, we don't know, but Rivers and Haddon, both of them were associated with India. I have told you when I was talking about Rivers that Brown was going to fulfill the unfinished task of Rivers by studying Andaman Islanders. You remember that? You remember? So when I am saying that somebody's impact was there on the other thinker, it might be of different kinds. One, maybe he must have been motivated by the fieldwork traditions, or he must have been influenced by the concepts that he was talking about, theoretical outlook, or the core thing that they were examining, meaning that whether they were examining one particular social institution, or is it that they were studying social change, things like that. I mean, what is it that the underlying theme? Or for that matter, when I say that Fraser's influence on Malinowski, we can see that in the case of examining magico-religious practices, things like that. Now, these discussions that we are trying to make here will help you form an opinion, form an answer when time occurs. I mean, when things like this come in the exam. For instance, Rivers and Brown, if we have to see the impact of one over the other. Of course, Torres Strait was the watershed point where Brown was getting influenced. Because what inspired him was, it was not simply anthropologists, people from different disciplines were getting involved in that work. That's where he was starting to think on these lines. Is it that there could be certain principles that can be valid not simply for one discipline but various other disciplines put together also? Can there be rules that may be equally applied to several disciplines? See, we are talking about a discipline where we already said by now that there cannot be one best way, or there is only one way of doing things. We said that there's no one way of doing things, because being an anthropologist, we'll have to respect the diversity. So within anthropology, by now we have come to a conclusion that there cannot be one single way of doing things. But this is the man who was raising this point. Let's see, when several disciplines are coming together and trying to work, is it possible that we come up with certain rules that may be applied for all the disciplines? But then he starts with the first one. Maybe we will have to start with anthropology becoming more a scientific discipline. So this is the second thing. One is, he was trying to examine culture, societies and cultures from social structure perspective. Through social structure, he is trying to examine the change that is occurring there. And second thing is, he was somebody who wanted to see the possibility of bringing certain laws that can be applied to all the societies. So he wanted to go in a step-by-step way. Maybe I will try to bring certain universally valid laws as far as anthropology is concerned. Then maybe we can go to the level of looking for laws that can be applied to all the disciplines. Are you with me, sir? Are you with me, sir? Go with the flow of the statements. Many times, being readers, we may not be able to substantiate much more than what the thinker is saying. So our effort may be a very limited one. But then don't lose the string there. I repeat. Second one is, he was in an effort to bring certain laws, which he called social laws, that can be applied to all the societies. Having done that, he said that, after this, maybe we can try having certain laws that can have universal applicability across all the disciplines. But of course, critics say that he failed at the first one itself. No doubt he had a grand dream. I told you in one of our earliest classes that unlike several other social sciences, anthropology never wanted to prove itself to be a science. Anthropology, that's the reason why I said any problem, you can ask me. Unlike any other social science, anthropology didn't claim that it was a science. And that was also the reason why we don't see this particular topic in the syllabus, whether anthropology is a science or art. If you could recall that, I am trying to elaborate on it. If somebody wants to prove that this discipline is a science, you would want to have certain laws which have universal applicability or universal acceptance or whatever. If at all in anthropology any such laws has to occur that can be universally applied to all the societies and cultures, we'll have to see what they could be. So when he was writing such essays, such discussions, people were anyway started to have huge expectations. People started to have huge expectations. Generally it happens based on the kind of promise with which you are starting. People started to think that maybe anthropology can now be proved as a rational discipline. But bear in mind, the beauty of anthropology is not being rational. All other subjects are hell-bent to show that they are rational, because rationality is seen as the basic characteristic of being modern, being scientific. Meaning that you look for evidences. Without evidence you don't believe in. You also believe that no, there has to be rules, there has to be laws that have to be right across time and space. So when he was writing, people started expecting a lot from him. At one place, Harris writes that people were expecting answers to questions like, like what could be the circumstances when people may go for institutions like polyandry, or why is it that somebody would pray for one particular kind of a living. Maybe he will give us some kind of answers that can be universally applied. But unfortunately, that did not happen. He wanted to make it a scientific discipline. In that process, he was trying to write reams of information. He extensively had written, and he tried to convince people, convince his students, his colleagues in order to do researches in that direction. That had led to a massive outflow of ethnographs. It is here we will have to agree that when compared to Malinowski, the students of Brown had produced many more ethnographs. At one place, no, it is written in the biography of Brown that somehow one is supplementing the other in terms of anthropological work. It used to happen this way. When the students had to talk about theory building and concepts of anthropology, they used to go to Brown. And when they had to talk about field work and take guidelines regarding that, they would go to Malinowski, when both of them together were working in one particular university. But somewhere that link was missing. Concept and fieldwork link was missing. People say that the kind of mileage and fan following Brown was having was much more intense when compared to Malinowski. Primarily because Brown was helping people to think and to bring newer concepts. So when we say that contributions of one particular thinker, you shall not be weighing that based on how many concepts he must have written or what is the length of things that he must have written. So many times non-measurable things, if you could recall something like Panchashila of tribals, tribal Panchashila in India. The last statement in tribal Panchashila, it says that you shall not measure development by the quantity of money that you are spending on them. You will have to measure it based on what is the improvement that is occurring, which is acceptable to them, which is a sustainable one for them. So it is in that particular sense, as far as Brown is concerned, his encouragement led to several additional ethnographs to come in. We'll continue with the other things there. I was writing something elsewhere. Just have a look at this. Look at the last one. For Malinowski, his data collection was mostly about the things that were very much visible, and there has to be a bracket here, closing. He considers non-material things as well. So from the fieldwork, Malinowski was trying to get his details from the ones that are very much visible. Finish writing, then I will talk. This point especially I have written in order to once again talk about Gestalt's ideas. One person was mostly interested in visible things, but he understood the link between visible, material and non-material. When it comes to Malinowski, he was trying to have evidence from the material aspect or the obvious behavioral aspect. He was trying to have an evidence from obvious behavioral aspect or a material aspect. Meaning that when they are going on long journeys of Kula voyages, it was a very visible behavior that he was noticing. But behind this visible thing, there is some kind of understanding about maybe the supernatural or maybe the previous generations or maybe the kind of relationship one islanders could be having with the other. Or for that matter, he was studying magico-religious practices, as I was mentioning earlier. Sometimes the magical rituals were smaller in time length, not so very intense compared to certain other occasions. So the occasion was specific. He was trying to understand the link between the non-material and material aspect, whereas here in this particular case, in the case of Brown, there is more of a discussion about something that is imaginary, something that is non-material, and it requires a bit of effort to see what he is actually telling us. So when I say that there is something like a social structure, the very much visible thing may not be there. He is actually conceiving here. Once he is conceiving here, maybe to understand what he is saying, you might look at the society, search for such kind of structures. So what he is trying to do is, the things that are existing in the society, he is trying to bring them to particular symbols in communicating to us. I repeat what I said. He is trying to reduce the social process to certain writable, certain symbolic ways, so that you can understand them through the symbols that he is actually mentioning to us. So today nobody would blink for a second when you will have to draw a picture about, say, a joint family, because that kind of structure has got ingrained in the minds of the people. From him we see a sudden increase in trying to write things in such kind of pictures. So bringing social processes into certain writable formats was something that he had brought into practice. But then whatever he is mentioning, they are there in the society in a very subdued, invisible way, but then they are existing. When I say that there is a social structure existing, it is originally there in the society, but then you are trying to represent it in a format a reader can conveniently write about and think about. I hope you are following what I am saying. But when it comes to Levi-Strauss, it is here you will have to understand a difference between the two words called, you understand this, you know? Nothing is not similar to no thing. Nothing is, there is nothing there. Nothing is, behind nothing there is something. We were seeing certain pictures in the previous class. You saw this in that class. Technically speaking, if I am considering this particular container, vessel, whatever object, it being placed there, and there is some kind of a light coming from the other side, it is giving us an illusion that actually there is something that is existing there. Now, when I say that Levi-Strauss was depending on the explanations from the field of Gestalt psychology, what I mean is he was trying to bring out things, he was trying to communicate to us that human mind can see things based on certain perceptions the mind creates. Of course, in the common usage we call it illusion. It is not simply illusion. He calls it the mental pictures that are created which may not be existing there. So this is the capacity of the human mind to bring out certain things that are actually not existing. Are you following what I am saying? So it all depends on the way the mind reacts to situations, how it sees things. There was one very beautiful statement said, we see things in the way we actually want them to see. We see things in the way we actually want them to see. In a way, we were speaking of selective listening in one other class. So your mind is actually prompting you to look for the things the way it wants the objects, the situations to see. Even in the situations we observe this. Many times we are actually blind towards certain things that are actually existing, but we start looking at the things that are not existing there. It is primarily because mind prompts the individual to see things which may not be existing there. There are two interesting things from Gestalt psychology that he had taken. One is that mind tries to see things that may not be existing there. That's where he says this is trying to understand no thing rather than nothing. Mind tries to bring about certain things from non-existence at all. Second thing is, which you have seen a picture the other day. The other principle of Gestalt is that the big picture is much more significant, much more imposing than the parts therein. Many times human mind ignores the smaller detail and focuses only on the big picture. Meaning that one conveniently ignores the smaller detail, even if it is a significant one. Sometimes human mind ignores smaller details, even if they are significant ones. Keeping this raw information in mind, keep it for a while. When I am saying that he is ignoring the smaller details, even if they are vital, this comes to be opposition to the very traditional anthropological ethnographs. And these kind of thinkings were opposed by people whom we call Boasian thinkers. For them, even a smallest detail is very important. But for people who are following Gestalt psychology and even Levi-Strauss, when he says that many times smaller details go unnoticed than the bigger one, these are being criticized by Boasian supporters. It is not simply that we are going a little further. A continuation from this kind of thinking was given by Levi-Strauss when he says that humans most often think in binary oppositions. These things look to be slightly off for us, slightly awkward for us. When he says that human minds think in binary oppositions, it means that we think in terms of two opposite things, two opposite traits. It's like good and bad, or zeros and ones, blacks and whites. So for everything we try to look at what are the two diametrically opposite things. See, right now when we are talking about binary oppositions in the concept of Levi-Strauss, we are not trying to argue against him. We are trying to understand what he is saying. He says human minds are trained to think in binary oppositions, plus and minus kind of things. When he says this, he is in a way hinting at enculturation process. In the enculturation process, we are actually subjected to this way of training, what is good and what is bad. If you could recall what you were taught, it is actually thinking in the lines of what has to be done, what has not to be done. It's not like a via media. You are not trained being a child, saying that something that you are doing is sometimes good and sometimes bad. You are not told that. You are only asked to behave in one particular way, what is good and what is bad. Okay, this is what he calls universality in mental structures. What he means by universality in mental structures is there is a general human tendency in the enculturation process that most often human societies train children in the binary to think in the binary oppositions. See, over a period of time, as one is growing up, with the experiences, you might become smart or whatever you want to say, or shrewd, intelligent, whatever it could be. That's where you are trying to justify whatever you are doing is a combination of good and bad. Look at that. As a child, you are actually taught to take decisions, or you are actually taught in terms of blacks and white and plus and minus alone. So it's like there are only two poles for any thinking. Either you are here or there. There is nothing like in between. But then as you are growing up, so in the childhood, you are taught to be truthful. You are not supposed to lie. But as you are growing up, conditions start getting attached, or conditional truths start coming up. Situational truths start coming up. I call them technical truths. Technical truths. For example, I'll give a small thing there. When one of my cousins was there in some place, he was supposed to be in the room and was away from the family. The task was to study and prepare for the exam, kind of. And when a parent calls, kahan par ho, he would say, I'm in the room. He is not saying whether he is in his room or somebody else's room. He did not lie actually. So when you grow up, when you have to tell her, you will have to communicate to her. What are you doing? I am doing the office work. What kind of office work it is? Or when you say that you are with a colleague, what kind of detail it is? You are keeping it in a secrecy. At the same time, you are not lying. But then this process of intermediaries was neglected by him. For him, all human minds think in binary oppositions, blacks and whites. Even in the emotions, there are extremes there. This seems to be a halfway work. Maybe that some people who are ardent supporters of Levi-Strauss, what they say is, maybe he is trying to communicate a very ethical value judgment there, which can be universally applied. Meaning that he is trying to communicate to us that there can be certain universal rights and universal wrongs. Anything intermediate is because of the pollution that comes up through various processes, maybe in the basic evolution itself. So 3 things you remember about Levi-Strauss. One is, for him, The microscopic detail is not very important. The big picture that emerges is important because mind conceives the big picture. Second thing he says is minds are trained to see things which may not be existing there, but from no thing they try to bring some kind of an understanding. Many times we do this. Sometimes even if there is no issue, we create an issue. There are so many skits on those lines. If one fine day she actually decides that she has to have a fight with you, she will have it because she wants it that day. How much ever you try not to have one. This may be only a small hilarious example that we are giving, but you can apply it to the situations. Many times where there is nothing there, you try to create things. This particular way of thinking generally is not elaborated in anthropology books here. But then once we go to the background once we go to the basic writings of Levi-Strauss, we see in his writings an extension of this. When he says that human minds are trained or they generally create things from no thing. This finally goes on to talk about if there is a material, what is the source of the material? There are two answers for this. If there is a material, what is the source of material? You may be saying that a material may be the result of your thinking. You wanted some kind of an object to do particular task, so you are creating. The answer may also be like, what is the basis of the material, any material for that matter? If I am going by the second one, are you following what I am saying? If I am going by the second one, is he communicating that any material is emerging from nothing? Is it that any matter is coming into existence from vacuum? That takes us back to topics such as the Big Bang and things like that. What is the source of matter? See, question is about one very practical, realistic thing. What is the source of matter? But your answer depends on whether you are a physicist, whether you are a person from chemistry, or whether you are somebody from biology, or whether you are somebody from theology. Question is one and the same. That is, what is the source of matter? So, in a way, his writings, Levi-Strauss' writings, are much more applicable to more than anthropology in terms of discipline when compared to Brown's writings. When Brown was saying that, see, why not we have rules that can be universally applied not simply to anthropology but other disciplines also. Maybe he was having that grand dream. Levi-Strauss didn't dream. He was writing his thoughts randomly, and through the random thoughts we could see that he was raising questions of this kind, such as source of matter, or is there something behind nothing? Is it that any kind of impact is there from enculturation? Is there any impact of enculturation on seeing the things which are not existing? Are you following? When he's saying about enculturation, he's hinting at the way of upbringing in a cultural situation, in a cultural setup. So, to sum up, sir, we are talking about three different people. They were trying to examine. The first one, Malinowski, was trying to examine things from the culture perspective. The second one, Brown, was trying to examine from society's perspective. So, first one is culture and individual. Second one is society's perspective. Third is mind's perspective. Now, so you will have to look at something else. Some people call Levi-Strauss writings as more to do with psychology. Levi-Strauss thinking is more to do with psychology, but he strongly disagrees with it. And a few try to compare him with classical evolution, because classical evolution was also a dreaming thing, he is also. What he himself says is classical evolutionists were using a rethinking method, where you are sitting and thinking like a primitive man is thinking. You remember that term, right? Whereas for Levi-Strauss, whether it is primitive, modern, it doesn't matter for him. Man is an eternal entity for him. At any point of time, man has the capability of seeing, bringing out things from nothing. So this is not a rethinking perspective. He is actually giving a general human perspective. Are you following what I am saying? Did you follow? Did you follow what I said? No. If somebody says yes, there's a big doubt. If somebody says no, आप सही रास्ते पे हो. A student had written an assignment saying that I hope I am following you properly. My husband had this observation. Last year by this time anyways, that must have been raining. I must have got a fever last year also. Now he says, no, last year also when you were talking about Levi-Strauss, you had fever. This year also you have a fever. Crazy people, I say. Don't worry. See, Levi-Strauss is such a person. People might conclude him from different ways. So one of the ways in which you are concluding may not be the way the examiner is concluding. So by the way you are writing, you are enriching his knowledge. Certain things out there. These are few other comparisons that I was making. I would take you till language and we'll go back to right. Malinowski was respecting diversity, whereas Brown was aiming to bring universal social laws. That's what I was mentioning a little while ago. Societies are what they are based on, what they think of themselves. How many times you must have heard this? You are what you think of yourself. Anti-classical evolution, anti-psychic unity, anti-speculations, these were all by Malinowski. Anti-abstractness, anti-extreme functionalism, anti-speculations. So this one was Malinowski, this was Brown, and the last one was Levi-Strauss. We call them structuralism. We call them a structuralist because he is not much interested in the function. He never wrote about function at all. He was only talking about structures that are there in the mind. Because they are there in the mind, you see them in the society. That's how it. Whether that structure has any function, he doesn't want to talk about it. Basing on abstractness and anti-social structure. When I say anti-social structure, he was against Bowers. On the other hand, when Bowers was an anti-speculationist and anti-abstractness of the French, he is actually criticizing Levi-Strauss. When I am saying this two, it's a continuation from the previous slide. This two is actually to differentiate between Malinowski, Brown and Strauss. Maybe I could have made a table, but what were you watching before I came? Oh no. Well, then I don't have any surprises. Big Boss ఏది ఎన్టీఆర్ దా From now on, when I am not there, when I come 10-15 minutes late, just in case, I'll pass on a question to them, you sit and write. That is much better than watching a big boss in the class. Though I also love that man. Can I go? So it's like we have almost come to the close of the thought, maybe another couple of classes. Small thinkers, I'll be sending you notes, Salins and service kind of people. So my aim is that by another couple of classes we will drag it to one end. And I'll start with archaeology. Is that fine with you all? That was my plan actually, archaeology. Then why I'm asking this question is one message I got yesterday, ma'am थोड़ा सा हल्का कुछ ले लो. तो मुझे लगा कि शायद पूछना चाहिए लड़कों को कि क्या करना है. Is it that you want me to talk about very lighter things such as caste? I mean, to bear with it is unbearable one, but to talk about it, it's easy. So you decide and let me know whether you want me to start with caste related Indian social system, or I will start with archaeology. Very. Huh?
You will not be teaching physical anthropology.
We will be teaching. सब कुछ पढ़ाना ही है. सब कुछ पढ़ाना ही. I am not going to leave anything. That class, I thought I would just introduce and then tell you how certain questions have to be answered, so that आपको लगे कि थोड़ा थोड़ा you are getting exposed to the other side also. Okay. In a way, yes. In a way, it is a psychic unity of mankind, though he doesn't use that word. He was just giving this concept of universality of social structure, universality of mental structures. So it's like all humans think in terms of binary oppositions. I was here. I don't think there's a problem with this. I read out for you. Malinowski was an anti-classical evolutionist, the one against psychic unity and any kind of speculations. Brown was against the abstractness of the French writers. He was anti-extreme functionalist and anti to speculations. On the other hand, Levi Strauss was basing his writings on abstractness and criticizing what Brown was writing. He was not really bothered about whether there is a general social structure, particular, etc. For him, if anything has to occur in the society and culture, it has to be primarily there in the mind of the people belonging to that culture. Unless until you have things in mind, you cannot have in the society. Of course, people are there who try countering this. Is it that everything that is there in the society is coming from the mind alone? The answer to that, once again, is the same like chicken and egg. But right now we are basing our talk on Levi-Strauss alone. We'll see this one. How each of them is viewing customs and how each of them is viewing language. These are the two things we will talk about, then start continuing to write about Levi-Strauss. So there is one other thinker in Indian anthropology called S.C. Dubey. Dubey was somebody who had done field work in Hyderabad state, just outside the greater Hyderabad now. There is a village called Shamirpet, which is more or less assimilated in Hyderabad now. Shamirpet village. The kind of work that he was doing there, he was motivated by Brown. There was one very significant things that he resorted to study in Shamirpet because of Brown. Brown had made a statement. You remember the definition of symbol given by Brown in the previous class? Anything in culture that has a meaning can be called a symbol. So you can gauge the strength of Brown in defining things with that definition. When it comes to customs, now I will take you to these words. Sometime back a few students were also asking, certain vital terms we will pick up. I'll write this also. Custom, ritual, tradition, and habit. Tradition is the word that we defined earlier also. Tradition is something, any practice or anything that flows from one generation to the other, that is handed over from one generation to the other. So worshipping Lord Krishna must be coming in your community, in your family lineage as a tradition. Your great-grandparents had worshipped Lord Krishna and hence the other people also. So it may be particular practices, or occasionally it may be material aspects also that might come as a tradition. As the tradition was going, your great-grandfather was studying for ICS sitting in that particular chair. Then your grandfather did, your father did, and now you are doing in the same chair. Two things are coinciding there. One, all of you are actually looking for that ICS. Second thing is, in order to get into ICS, there has to be a material help. That material is coming in the form of that chair. So occasionally materials can also be as a part of tradition, apart from beliefs and practices. Then how does one distinguish between custom and a tradition? और बताइए, keep talking. So custom may be the beginning point of a tradition. Custom may be the originating point of a tradition. It might get established at a particular stage in a society or culture. If the custom becomes a practice over a period of generation, across the generations, then custom takes the form of a tradition. So custom is a practice that is held respectfully by a culture group. Of course, there can be several other tentacles to it, several other kinds of things that you attach to describing custom. How do we distinguish between custom and a ritual? What is a ritual? Ritual we came across earlier. A ritual is a rhythmic performance of something, rhythmic performance of certain acts, which has certain conditions of time boundedness or space related requirements, restrictions. I repeat what I said. A ritual is a rhythmic performance of an act with restrictions of time and space. I repeat, a ritual is a rhythmic performance of an act with restrictions of time and place. Occasionally you see the participants also being restricted there. I mean, who has to perform a ritual? There might be a restriction on that. Ritual, in one sense, if it is understood, in common parlance, we see this as a mechanical way of doing things. See, as per definition, we said that it is a rhythmic act. You're not supposed to alter the sequence, you're not supposed to alter the time, or maybe individuals also are specific, space is also specific kind of. When all this you are performing, occasionally it takes the form of a mechanical doing of things. It's as simple as when you start studying a discipline, there was an enthusiasm. Later you understood a ritualistic way of doing things that transformed into a mechanical way of doing things, an unattached way of doing things. So when the ritual takes the form of mechanical way of doing things, it loses its sanctity. It loses its sanctity. It's as simple as when you go to the court of law, you may be taking an oath, putting your hand on that holy book. As long as the book meant something for you, there was a sanctity for you, that ritual had a purpose. The moment it loses its significance, it is not more than a mechanical act. Sometimes certain rituals are for once in a lifetime only. The sanctity remains only if you take up the ritual once in a lifetime. If you are doing it more than once in a lifetime, that may become a mechanical thing. One marriage is fine. More than one is a mechanical act. You are going on accumulating numbers, not the relations there. I hope you understood. So when ritual and custom, when we are trying to distinguish between them, ritual can be part of a custom. Ritual can be a part of a custom. Customs are a big thing, but ritual becomes one component within. I was using these words in the context of S.C. Dubé. S.C. Dubé was inspired by R.C. Brown when Brown said that it is a very important task of a social anthropologist to study rituals in a society. I repeat what I said. For Brown, social anthropologist has a special task of studying rituals. The way Brown looks at rituals is something like this. Many times we participate in the rituals because we have to, not because we want to. we start to believe that if rituals are not performed, there may be a threat to the existence of the society itself. Can you give one example of any particular ritual? If you are violating, there may be a threat to the existence of the society. నీకు తప్ప ఎవరికి నష్టం లేదు, చెప్పండి. Any ritual, if one is violating, there is a threat for the existence of the society or culture group. और कुछ बताइए. Maybe tarnishing our friend, what she says is tarnishing the image of the national flag, or the way you treat the national flag, maybe with an element of disrespect or whatsoever, that might have. So you are actually violating certain rituals that you are supposed to follow with regard to the flag. If you are violating them, there might be a bigger impact on the rest of the society. When I am saying this, the impact need not necessarily be on that individual alone, but the entire group. Of course, it depends on how you are weighing the rituals. Occasionally, certain rituals are considered to be more significant for certain societies when compared to the other ones. But at the end of the day here, for R.C. Brown, rituals are very important. For social anthropologists, studying rituals is almost equal to studying the society. For a social anthropologist, studying rituals is almost equal to studying society, meaning in terms of when you are trying to study society, you are actually studying the rituals alone. So a compilation of rituals when you are putting across to the reader, your job of presenting that culture group or that society is done. Are you with me, sir? So it all depends on individual thinkers. For some thinkers, individual is important. For some thinkers, society is important. For some thinkers, it is customs that are important. I repeat. We are talking about two things. One, how these three people have viewed customs. I started with Brown because he had extensively dealt with this topic of importance of customs in ethnography. So for Brown, most of the time, social anthropologist, if he is a field worker, he has to indulge in studying customs, reporting on customs of that culture group, which is almost equal to reporting about that culture group. When such kind of statements are made by Brown, they were taken as rules by certain thinkers. Say, for example, Turner is there, or certain other symbolic anthropologists are there. They are picking up particular customs, not a huge lot of them, one or two customs, and trying to equate them to the culture, with the culture itself. That was a damage, of course. When it comes to Malinowski, customs have a function to perform. Every custom has a function to perform. Collaring is not simply a transaction for him. It is a custom which has a function to perform, that may be bringing cohesion in the island populations. Or for that matter, there may be some kind of religious rituals that you would perform as a part of customs. They have their own functions to perform. So he was trying to look at the functionality of every ritual and custom that he is trying to study. So the examination of Malinowski of the customs is from functionalistic perspective. Are you with me, sir? For Malinowski, it is a functionalistic way of looking at customs. For R.C. Brown, customs are nothing but, a group of customs are nothing but a compilation of the entire culture itself. So if you are not studying customs, you are not studying the culture at all. Now, coming to Levi-Strauss, custom is a manifestation of the mental structure. Custom is a manifestation of mental structure. You might see certain things to be right and to be wrong. Based on what you perceive as right and wrong, you devise your cultures, your customs. Based on what your mind conceives as right and wrong, you devise customs. Now, there are other questions that are put forth to Levi-Strauss. If every human mind thinks in terms of these binary oppositions, why is it that there are so many diverse customs in the world, across the culture groups? See, first of all, it becomes difficult for us to understand the meaning of mental structures as he writes. In the first place, when he says that customs is the result of what your mental structures conceive things to be, or what is brought out in the binary oppositions. Now the question is, if every human mind thinks in terms of these binary oppositions, why is it that so many diverse customs are existing in the world? There is one statement which we do not want to explain further. One statement made by Levi-Strauss, that is, all human minds fundamentally are the same. All human minds fundamentally are the same. Sir, when a friend was asking whether it is equal to psychic unity, there is a difference here. In psychic unity, the classical evolutionists were trying to compare the things that look to be similar. And an answer to the similarity across cultures, they call it psychic unity. An answer for the similarity across cultures is psychic unity. But when it comes to Levi-Strauss, the statement he gives is all human minds are fundamentally one and the same. But how they perceive things is based on what fills in the minds. I repeat the sentence. All human minds are fundamentally one and the same. But the things they see, or cultural diversity, is because of how the minds perceive things. Meaning that there may be things that are differently perceived by the minds. Maybe he is trying to take us from something that is very objective into the tendency of human minds becoming subjective because of the kind of things that are getting filled in. I repeat, sir. He believed that human minds think in binary oppositions. If binary oppositions is true, why is it that there is so much of cultural diversity? For which what he says is, human minds are fundamentally one and the same. But what fills in makes them perceive things differently. Now, the question that might come to your mind is, what is the meaning of what fills in? It might be enculturation, or it might be the changing tendency of the mind from very objective to the subjective side. With experiences in life, people start to notice the things that are via media. So they move from the binary oppositions of something like a universal do's and don'ts to the things that can be manipulated. Did you understand what I said? I struggled hard to frame these sentences for you because he was writing in French. One problem is, when an English fellow was translating from French, many words must have got changed. And once we try to understand what an English fellow is trying to write in a very unclear way, it becomes a responsibility of a teacher to bring out certain statements that a student can appreciate and understand. I leave it to you. In psychic unity, what we said was, classical evolutionists are trying to explain reasons for similarity in the cultures. Different cultures are there, they look to be similar. Why are they similar? Because there is psychic unity. Here he is not explaining similarity. He is explaining differences. For him, each human mind is one and the same. That may be seen as a very fundamental thing of psychic unity. All human minds think in binary opposition. They are fundamentally one and the same. But somehow, somewhere, he is indirectly hinting at evolution of mental structures. So, human minds are fundamentally one and the same, but they perceive things differently. It's as simple as I give the same book, I give the same lecture. Each one of you understand differently. If you could explain that reason, this question is clear. When you are looking at the same book, when you are studying the same book, when you are attending the same lecture, each one of us is understanding things in a different way. Sometimes you are understanding, some of you are understanding whatever I meant. Some of you are understanding what I have not taught. Some of you have missed out what I have taught. If 100 people are there, 100 people have different perceptions, different understandings of the same lecture that I have delivered. Why is that happening? That is my question to you. Why is that happening? What's your name, sir? Hari. Harinath?
Hari, just Hari.
Okay. Who is Harinath? Harinath, you wrote something? Okay. और बताइए, I am looking for your answer. Why do you people understand differently the same thing that is delivered to you? See, she is a Levi Strauss in the making. Many times we can't explain things. Not every question has an answer for the justification of the questioner. Not every question has an answer for the justification of the questioner. Many times questions have to be left alone for themselves to answer by themselves. So don't think that every question has to be answered. Or maybe our question itself is wrong. Maybe our question itself is wrong. Once again, I am bringing back those last sentences so that I can close properly. What I was saying was, all human minds are basically fundamentally one and the same, because all human minds think in terms of binary oppositions. Maybe because all human minds basically at the initial level are taught to in terms of black and white. But the diversity in cultures might be because of how different minds are perceiving the same thing in different way. Some of you must have written some of you must be painters, some of you might be architects. So you must have done this in the class. Certain things are put on the dais. You are asked to draw. So what you are seeing from different sides of the hall gives you a different picture of the same thing. So finally your picture actually comes up differently. No two of you are actually giving the same kind of a picture, though objects are the same, arrangement is the same. It may be, and maybe the ones who are into civil engineering drawings, you must have seen this, how the isometric projections are. From different directions if you observe, you have different kinds of perceptions that you get. That is the reason why sometimes we are guided by our mentors to change the way you look at things. Maybe you try to look at from another dimension. The answer you might get is an altogether different one. See, these things look to be very abstract. They look to be very abstract. But from the abstractness, you find that you get a different kind of understanding sometimes. When I'm saying that, see, you think from another perspective, you look from the other side. అసలు నేను చూస్తేగా ఇంకో సైడ్ నుంచి చూడడానికి. That's what is the abstractness here. So when he says that, basically they are binary oppositions, but then they are perceiving things differently, maybe because of two reasons. One is based on enculturation or what fills in, and secondly, in the process of human learning, he might be moving from the so-called very objectivity to the subjective way of looking at things. For a very practical man, this subjectivity may be something like accommodation. You are actually challenging the basic foundation of human mind to think in binary oppositions, good and bad. Finally, what you are transpiring into is a via media, or you are nowhere. So being subjective, you are actually losing the objective truth. Did I communicate to you? When people say that there is no single way of doing things, you may say that no, there are different ways of doing the same thing. You are actually losing your objectivity. It is actually at this particular point, Brown and Levi-Strauss differ from one another. Superficially, you don't understand when it is said that Brown was criticizing the abstractness of the French people, French writers. అది ముక్కును పెట్టుకొని వెళ్ళి 2 minutes రాసొస్తావు ఎగ్జామ్లో. But the meaning of it is when Brown says that he is opposing the abstractive nature of the French writers. What he meant by that is, see, Brown was looking for having a laws applicable to all the societies in the similar way, meaning that there is one single way of doing things. There is a universal law that is applicable to all the cultures. That was Brown's idea. Whereas for Levi-Strauss, though you are fundamentally one and the same, you are actually doing things in different ways. Because there is a difference in perception. The perception difference may be because of different reasons. One is your enculturation, your upbringing, and the things that you are getting exposed to. Second thing could be that in the process of growth, in the process, an individual is moving away from objectivity to subjectivity. It looks to be something like a person is getting mature, but he is not getting mature, he is getting polluted. Sometimes it becomes difficult when a child asks, you told me that I have to do this, but you are not doing this. So in the process, what is happening is, one is losing the so-called humbleness, the so-called honesty in doing things, to less honest or dishonest. It depends on the grade that you belong to. That is the summary of Levi-Strauss writings. నేను చెప్తే మీరు ఓ అన్నారు. Keep thinking on these lines. Binary oppositions, what fills in, enculturation, difference between psychic unity and mental structures of Levi-Strauss. So in one of the tests, those 10 tests that I was talking about, they are full length tests. आज क्या है डेट? 22nd को तो आपका टेस्ट आने वाला है. These are the full length tests. In between, as fillers, we give you smaller tests, जैसा कि fill in the blanks वाले. This time the fill in the blanks test will be slightly on a tougher side. So I might ask you to write a couple of lines on topics like this, difference between these two. Okay, or I might ask you to bring the core of the concept of one particular field work by an individual. So it is not like MCQs are there and you are ticking easily, or one word answers are there where who has written this particular book or who studied this particular society. It's not going to be like that. It is slightly on a deeper side, and I hope that you will come up to my expectations. Whether I am coming to your expectations, that's a big question. Generally, almost the first 20 classes we will be doing thought only. So I think we are almost near to that. Your first test is going to be up to Malinowski. Second test will be in total anthropological thought. We'll start writing. We'll bring that to a proper conclusion. Keep writing, sir. I was dictating in that previous class a comparison with R.C. Brown's social structure. Continue writing. Maybe 1-2 sentences, maybe a repetition. Don't mind. We are continuing to write about Levi-Strauss. Levi-Strauss accepted. Levi-Strauss accepted the concept of social structure. The concept of social structure of R.C. Brown but rejected the functional aspects. He concentrated on universal human thought, underline that, universal human thought for cross-cultural comparisons, universal human thought for cross-cultural comparisons. According to him, human minds are universally the same. But manifest into different social structures based on mental structures. Based on mental structures. Write in the brackets. A major component of mental structures. A major component of mental structures is enculturation. Close the bracket. Right to the next pair. He was a prolific writer. Who presented his thoughts in a less understood manner, giving scope for difference in conclusions. He differed from Brown in the type of structures that are emphasized. For example, Brown focused at tangible, observable elements. And Levi-Strauss studied mental structures that are imaginary and unseen. His writings had more philosophical bent and were influenced by ideas such as, write in quotes, the whole, WHOLE, the whole is always greater than the parts therein. Unquote. He was influenced by the popular school of psychology of the time, called Gestalt psychology, GESTALT, Gestalt psychology, which propounded that human perception of seeing things is based on what they conceive from no thing. Accordingly, Levi-Strauss gave his opinion about the reasons for studying language. Right in the brackets there. Right in the brackets. For Malinowski, study of language is to have better communication, in the field, and to have better relation with his subject. Continue in the bracket. For Brown, language offers an additional tool to study social structures. He presents language itself as a structure in the society that is presented from general and particular social structure perspective. Close the bracket. For Levi Strauss, language is the result of the humans finding a necessity to have codes, CODES, have codes to communicate. The members in a culture group learn the codes as are given to him. The members generally do not question the rules of language and grammar, because it is difficult for one to find answers to such questions. The members follow language rules. Because they understand that they will be successfully communicating to the others if they stick to the rules. Right in the next paragraph. Combining several ideas, including those of language and structure, Levi Strauss introduced his concept of basic or binary oppositions in his book Structuralism and Ecology, 1972. To substantiate, he used concepts such as hot and cold, male and female, culture and nature, raw and the cooked, etc. He explained kinship, myths, 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 and language using binary oppositions. Write a small side head there. Linguistics. Linguistics. For Levi-Strauss, language helps in understanding mental structures. Thereby, one can understand the social structures of a society. For him, language indicates a reflexes of mind. Differing from one second, what you have written there was, for him language indicates reflexes of mind, full stop. Differing from Morgan's evolutionary explanations, of classificatory and descriptive terms, he considered usage of specific kinship terms to be the result of such reflexes. Secondly, he examined kinship in his book Elementary Structures of Kinship, wherein he felt that kinship is not based on descent. Kinship is not based on descent, but it is due to marriage. In other words, kinship defines marriageability. Kinship defines marriageability or otherwise of an individual. Marriage and kinship are mechanisms of exchanging cordial relations. he dealt extensively with the concept of exogamy. For him, exogamy, I repeat, what was that? Can I get? In other words, kinship defines marriageability or otherwise. Marriage and kinship are the mechanisms of exchanging cordial relations. He dealt extensively with the concept of exogamy. According to him, exogamy emerged from the rules of descent, from the rules of incest. Exogamy emerged from the rules of incest. Incest gives rise to interest. ఎవడన్నది? That reminds me of क्या है वो? था देखिए, एक मूवी था इंसेप्शन. People pronounced in various ways which were comfortable to them. It became inspection occasionally. Take a definition of this term in the footnote. Then we'll continue writing. Incest is a culturally defined close kin marriage or sexual contact. Close kin marriage or sexual contact. That word culturally defined is very important. Who is an incestuous kinsman for you is culturally defined. We will be talking about it eventually, in a big way. Write down. Incest gives rise to the rules of reciprocity. Thereby, needs of each society and individual to be fulfilled. Read the last sentence to yourself. These are the views of Levi Strauss. First of all, incest is culturally defined. Because of incest, there would arise the practice of reciprocity. Reason for reciprocity is every culture's and individual's needs have to be fulfilled. What it means is, when you have defined incest, as a part of incest, you are mentioning who is non-marriageable to you. As a part of defining incest, you are listing who is non-marriageable to you. So, fundamentally we say that the members in the nuclear family come under the purview of incest. You are not supposed to indulge in sexual contact with the nuclear family members. But this seems to be a smallest group that may be followed in most of the communities. But when you are going outside the nuclear family, we have seen in the Iroquois that parallel cousins and one's own siblings are called by the same term, that is brother and sister. So technically speaking, you cannot marry your parallel cousins. Parallel cousins come under the incest list. Or if you go a little further to Eskimo, we find there that even cross cousins are addressed by the same term. All the cross cousins are addressed by the same term without a gender difference. There we said that it is not properly concluded whether they can marry cross cousins or not, but the ethnograph revealed that cross cousins also come under the incest list. Though you are not using the same term as brother and sister, you are distinguishing them with your own brother and sister, but then they are also your non-marriageable individuals. So in the process, what is happening? You are eliminating certain members from the list of marriageability. But marriage is your fundamental duty, I mean your basic need. Because it is your basic need and your society's basic need, you will have to get mates from somewhere. This exchange of mates comes as a part of reciprocity. Because I cannot marry my own brother and sister, I would marry your brother and sister. Instead, you can marry my brother and sister. The exchange of mates is happening. That's what he means by reciprocity. So rules are interlinked there. Incest is giving rise to reciprocity. Reciprocity here is a mechanism of fulfilling your need of having mates. Because you cannot take mates from your own culture group, that's what we call exogamy. You will have to look outside your own group in order to get your mates. Keep writing. He refers to the binary opposition. He refers to the binary opposition in this regard as, write in quotes, us and them, to bring such groups together, exogamy helps. In explaining reciprocity with regard to marriage, he proposed two types of reciprocity. One, balanced reciprocity that is generally found in the matrilineal societies where exchange of the female is across the generations. We'll explain what it is, don't worry. Exchange of the female is across the generations. On the other hand, in generalized reciprocity, individual, after providing a female to another, cannot have access to the female of that society, but the generalized reciprocity system fulfills each individual's and culture group's necessity. I'll first start with the second one, generalized reciprocity. Don't understand them as females, understand them as individuals, or maybe I'll. Because there is incest, there are two ways of reciprocity according to him. One, he says generalized reciprocity. Suppose I am talking about one individual or a community. What they have to do is they should provide the female to the other community or other individual. Don't expect anything immediately back from him. And this particular society would give their female in marriage to the others. This would continue. The hope is that your need will also be fulfilled by some such mechanism completing the cycle. From where your need will be fulfilled may not be guided, but then the task is that you give without expecting anything back. Anything in the sense, without expecting a female back in marriage from that society. So even today there are certain communities that follow this rule, that you are not going to take a female from the family or the community to which you have given your female. There is the other one, generalized reciprocity, balanced reciprocity. Okay. In this particular kind of a marriage, that is, if I am writing from this individual's perspective, the individual marrying his father's sister's daughters. This is one kind of cross-cousin marriage. He marrying father's sister's daughters. This was extensively studied among the Gonds by Heimendorf. Gond society, he finds father's sister's daughter being married to you. What happens here is, in this generation, this individual is actually getting a female from this particular family. So female is moving from this family to this family. As a result, this whole family at large, and he in particular, have this responsibility of repayment. I repeat what I said. We are speaking about the practice of marrying one's father's sister's daughter, a cross-cousin marriage, where the exchange is happening across the generations, meaning in one generation you are taking, in the next generation you are giving back. In parental generation, what is happening? Father is actually getting a female in marriage from this particular family. I am not writing parents, etc. here for the simplicity's sake. So female is moving in this direction. She is that female getting married and giving birth to a girl child. Now this is the duty of this family to give this girl to the family that had provided a female in the previous generation, completing the cycle. So in one generation, female is moving in that direction. In the next generation, she is moving in the opposite direction. Now don't get into subsequent questions like, don't they have the practice of bride price, because anyway in the next generation they are going to give back. Nobody knows, because next generation you are going to give birth to a female, there is no guarantee. As far as bride price is concerned, that is that business to be handled for that moment. There is no compromise about it. Don't think that you can get a girl without a bride price. No. These are the two types of reciprocities he was mentioning with regard to getting access to a female. So the come down to the next one. Write the second one there. Study of the raw and the cooked. Study of the raw and the cooked. According to Levi-Strauss, preparing and consuming food is related to binary thinking. Related to binary thinking. Boiled food is linked to exocuisine. Boiled food is linked to exocuisine, and roasted food linked to endocuisine. He tried to explain the kinship relations through the French cultural practice of food preparation and consumption. Right in the brackets. Which he unsuccessfully extended to explaining cannibalism. Right in the third point there. Study of myths. Myths emerge from human imagination and binary opposition of good and bad. Myths indicate the extent of human fantasies. It is here Levi-Strauss sees similarities in humans. His approach was different from that of classical evolutionists, who based their writings on historical approach and rethinking. The usage of psychic unity, concept by Levi-Strauss is evident in the way basic binary oppositions such as good and bad are explained. He defines a myth as a mechanism of mental structures, so that the society can maintain the status quo, in aspects such as social stratification, in this sense, he approached myth from a functionalist perspective. Right, in the next paragraph, certain bullet points you write about the critiques of Levi-Strauss. He has a lack of empirical studies, and a dependence on imaginary aspects. Secondly, there is a lack of concern for human individuality, Continue writing there. When he explains that fundamentally there are two perfectly opposite ways neglecting the intermediate ones, the Boasian supporters consider Levi-Strauss to be an opponent of, to be a critique of cultural relativism. Continue writing there. As cultural relativism for them is the basic characteristic of anthropology, and Levi-Strauss, in opposing such a concept, emerges to be anti-anthropological. Right, the next one. Materialists such as a Harris object the kind of imaginary explanations instead of observable and practical explanations. They criticize the impossibility of external obvious validation of the structural thinking as used by Levi-Strauss. Right, in the next paragraph. Due to the lack of functionalist explanations, Levi-Strauss is called a structuralist who emphasized dependence on mental structures rather than social structures. Continue the next sentence there. Though there are a few anthropologists today who declare themselves as structuralists, the idea of structuralism is still used in the search for a reason, of human mind and shape of the cultures, Such explanations are still the subject matter of cognitive anthropology, which looks at the way people think in order to identify these structures instead of analyzing oral or written texts, oral or written texts, as was done by postmodernists. Full stop. Back home, you try studying what you have written. Try to understand what you have written. So there are a couple of things. Hanji ma'am. More or less. I should have used the same, but you stick to one, both one and the same. Tomorrow's class you will be writing a small note on R.C. Brown, and we will be completing symbolism writing. There are a few other thinkers in symbolism, so I'll start with symbolism. People like Geertz and the other lady there, Mary Douglas. So tomorrow most probably I'll be coming to a close of thought if something is not left out for the other day. So there are a few other thinkers that are named as cognitive thinkers. Two names are mentioned in your syllabus, Conklin and Taylor. That you will be getting in the form of a soft copy. So in all probability the day after tomorrow, आज क्या है? आज Tuesday है ना? Tuesday है आज? हाँ. Wednesday, Thursday. So in all probability Thursday we will be starting the next major component of your syllabus. My wish is that I do archaeology, but I would want a voice out in tomorrow's class so that I can plan my lecture. Have a good time.